My name is David Leslie. I'm Professor of Ethics, Technology, and Society at the Digital Environment Research Institute here at Queen Mary University in London. I'm also the Director of Ethics and Responsible Innovation Research at the Alan Turing Institute. So the event today is really the launch of a special issue of the Harvard Data Science Review entitled Future Shock, Grappling with the Generative AI Revolution. In particular, we did a kind of special part of the special issue called a policy forum, in which we collected basically analysis pieces, op-ed style essays and articles from a broad range of different stakeholders. And so we have a lot of amazing contributors to that policy forum here today.
For me, at least, there's nothing really artificial about these artificial intelligence. They're truly all human intelligence. It's created by humans. It's trained on mostly human data. And now we have all kinds of issues we need to face, and we require our human intelligence to really deal with all these issues well. And particularly, there will be lots of compromise need to be made. As I think anytime you set a policy, most policies is really about, to find the right balance. Right?
How can we be creating trusted work? And I think the public need to know about trust. They need to know where work comes from. They need to make sure it's not deep fake. But having said all these and put them forward as problems, am I optimistic? Yes, because good, thoughtful policy can make this work for humans. And we have to understand it shouldn't be working for machines, it shouldn't be working for big tech. This should be something we should be using to enhancing human life. And if we work together and make it clear to our regulators what we want these machines to do, the ways we need to regulate them, I believe that working together we can create regulation that makes sure that the money goes back, in my case, to creators who, after all, pay taxes and therefore stimulate and get money that stimulate economies, and we can make tools that work for us.
So I proposed 3 kinds of recommendations in the paper. One, of course, has to do with national regulation and international treaties. To summarize, we need to make sure that companies only develop AI systems that are not going to harm people, and they need to be able to demonstrate that these systems are going to be safe. Now, right now, they wouldn't know how to do that in a satisfying way. So if governments were to ask that, there would be a whole lot more investment in research to solve this AI safety scientific problem. Second thing, we need to make sure that these systems are not going to be used in bad ways. We need to make sure that powerful systems with dangerous capabilities are secured so that they don't fall in the hands of bad actors. We need to make sure that no single person, no single corporation, no single government can abuse the power of systems that might be even smarter than humans. And finally, we need to do that investment that I've been talking about, making sure that we solve these scientific questions. How do we design systems that are going to be safe? How do we detect that a system may be unsafe? Questions to which we don't have satisfactory answers for now.
Is that there were several primary drivers of future shock that led to an AI policy and governance crisis. So what are those primary drivers? We kind of classify them in kind of 2 subsets of contributing factors. So on the one hand, preconditions that were absent, preconditions of readiness, preparedness for the transformation, the technological transformation that we are experiencing or we are witnessing. And this may include, gaps in the enforcement of the legal and regulatory regimes that I mentioned before. It includes as well difficulties to put principles into practice through widespread practices of ethics washing, difficulties in the legitimacy of certain processes of trustworthy AI standards, and other things. And at the same time, there were other factors that were present factors that led to a new scale and order of risks and harms. And here we find things such as model scaling, unprecedented scaling of model size, data, compute, all the things that also led to new type of model intrinsic risks, which bring us to issues of model opacity and complexity, to issues of increasing compute costing and emergent model capabilities, to name a few. These present factors also relate to rapid like industrial scaling. So here it means like the scaling into like more downstream applications that expose more people, more communities and groups to the many risks and harms presented by these models. And at the same time that impacted many ecosystems, be it like economic, cultural, natural, in which these systems are embedded. And the third factor that was very present in this process was centralization. So just a couple of, or a few big tech companies, powerful, well-funded, with the resources, with the knowledge, compute and data to build these models, and in a way leading to economic centralization, geopolitical centralization, and also model consolidation, which risk as well perpetuating legacies of economic, geopolitical, and cultural hegemony.
To conclude, broadly, what I want to basically bring in is the fact that, a lot of the developers and companies that are basically building these models are currently thinking about this moment of transformation where AI was initially used to discriminate tasks, in the sense of, how do you rank things, how do you basically label things as a way to basically differentiate one thing from the other. But now increasingly we are moving in a space where AI is generating content, which inevitably means that, we are not fundamentally dealing with user-generated content. We are dealing with AI-generated content, which seems to imply that there is a company behind it, and you could potentially see that, there is a way by which there's a direct correlation that can be drawn between what a model is saying and what a company believes in. And that relationship has increasingly turned a lot of this conversation around, generative AI to be about content policy, which is very different from the ways in which larger questions of security have been, historically thought about. And that transformation is crucial in understanding this current moment of generative AI.
I would like you to pay a look to the global south also when designing policy and so on regarding AI system. So they are already left behind in terms of internet access, and we need to pay attention because they should not be left out in the development of AI systems. And one important point I would like maybe to mention is about languages. In Nigeria, for instance, they have more than 500 languages. In Cameroon, we have more than 217 languages, local languages. So, and yes, I have also to admit that there are some works trying to develop a LLM system considering under-resourced languages, but the number of languages, it is too much for the moment, too much that are not considered in the development of those systems. And if we are not paying attention, the frequencies of extensions of those languages will increase with the penetration rate of technology that do not consider those languages. I would like to use one statement of Frederick, who said that a different language is a different vision. So we have to preserve the different visions we have in our world today. And I will end my talk or my first input by a statement of Andrew Ng. He said that what we need today is not bigger data, but better data. And since we are reaching the saturations of generative AI model, we need to reconsider the type of data and the origin of data that are used to train all those generative AI models.
Today, sort of in my paper, and this is what I would like to explore, the ways in which discourse around AI and policymaking and regulation of AI plays out, particularly the ways in which it is passively consumed and then copy pasted within the global south. And obviously there are gradations and nuances within what we mean by that. But largely that sort of raising questions about who gets to regulate and be part of conversations around AI policymaking, and also the kind of language around emergency and the urgency to regulate AI at the same pace at which AI is developing engenders a kind of a policy panic where these exclusions are enhanced even more, but at the same time also mirrors the kind of non-transparent ways, as some of the earlier speakers had pointed out, development of technology takes place. It ends up being replicated into the policy space. And when we talk about both development of AI technology and then regulation of AI technology, we've seen that the global south is often seen as a mere passive recipient of this technology, only brought in when we need to demonstrate a worst case scenario or this kind of AI gone bad in an authoritarian regime scenario. That's when these sort of countries and these populations and the relationship to AI and what regulation would mean in that context comes into play. And that it often takes very legitimate worries around and anxieties around AI and the pace at which generative AI, especially in its application, is progressing to sort of hasten and sort of quicken the pace at which this regulation should be taking place, rather than this kind of slow deliberation that is inclusive, that gives space for imagining different kinds of regulation, and also acknowledgement of the ways in which we have failed through legal instruments, through policy instruments, to regulate technology adequately in a way that is equitable, in a way that is just. And often we have seen the ways in which AI regulation and it shows up in the global south is through sort of this filtering down of so-called best practices that have already been passed in the West. And it often ends up not only not really speaking to the realities in which it is applied, much like AI and its application of that technology.
That we can't talk about the future shock of technology without addressing the threat that generative AI poses to our climate. Many of the problems that are part of the current AI boom were also part of the crypto hype cycle before it. The entire computing industry also relies on mining, manufacturing, shipping, use, and disposal practices that take an environmental and human toll, and generative AI is particularly resource intensive. Terms like AI, data center, and compute can obscure the disparities and forms of labor behind these technologies. So when we think about measuring and mitigating the climate impacts of AI across the supply chain and across its life cycle, it requires attention to what such terms obscure. Power can refer to both the energy consumption and power dynamics related to computation. There's a massive amount of compute needed to train generative AI, which requires specialized chips to run high energy workloads. And in addition to specialized chip design and fabrication, data centers, of course, also contribute to AI's environmental impacts. Recently, Dustin Edwards, Zane Cooper, and Mel Hogan published a crucial intervention defining the data center's relationship to colonialism and global supply chains. Data centers also require large amounts of water for on-site server cooling and off-site electricity generation, as well as energy for training and inference. And resource-intensive data centers impact different parts of the world unevenly. Putting a data center in a drought-stricken area could be detrimental to the people, other species, and habitats there. Within tech companies and the green software movement, which I was sort of a part of in my role at Intel, you might see energy supply chains presented as carbon intensity data, which is intended to help developers make greener decisions about when they train models. But developers don't often have control over their own workflows. If managers don't support this work, it won't happen. In tech circles and climate pledges, there's a tendency to focus on greenhouse gas emissions at the expense of other environmental factors. There's a problem with fetishizing carbon, particularly when carbon offsets are another point of financialization and exploitation, such as when carbon offsets are used to justify colonialism in the Amazon in the name of regenerative finance. Too often for tech companies, searching for the perfect data and the act of measurement in and of itself is the end of the story, which often fails to translate into meaningful structural change.
One of the things we need to acknowledge that we do not talk about is that the majority of the technology that we use today in consumer settings has been created for military means. So since the 40s, the biggest forcing function in R&D has been defense, and that we pretend very often that isn't the case and act surprised when we find out that things, you know, for instance, GPS is, you know, a technology that was created for the surveillance and targeting, not to get us home on a time. And so I think not only is it really important to address that, but it's equally important to ask that there's an investment that goes into other kinds of innovation that is not, you know, focused on power, that is maybe focused on care, well-being, and
public. The other issue that we touch upon is the regulatory gap and how it often tends to be very focused on technical solutions without looking at the larger scheme of things. And this is where some of the aspects of public interest washing often tend to come up as well. And I know a lot of the speakers have already spoken about this. I'm quickly going to move on to the next point, which I personally see as one of the more worrying trends that with a lot of tech firms, which is the rentiership models that a lot of them have, wherein we tend to buy into these packages of services that these large tech firms offer. And at any point when they control all of this software, the hardware, the storage, it is very easy for them to limit your access to it, be it by increasing the prices of goods, by limiting your access to it, saying, this was a free version, you now need to pay, you know, so much more for that. So the individual who might have thought, you know, maybe I'll introduce ChatGPT to interact with customers is no longer keen on using that, but is so entrenched in the system because they've built an entire business model based on a service that they brought from someone else. So this is, I guess, some of the aspects that is covered in this paper. And I do want to say that it doesn't merely, you know, criticize the whole realm of the tech domain right now. There are very, very important solutions.
For me, the future of constraining behavior has to be one which involves the voices that haven't been included before, and we are taking steps in that direction. Just to say, for instance, UNESCO is driving a really important conversation in sub-Saharan Africa, in East Asia, in South and Central America, on how to sort of regionally build readiness to sort of empower these areas so that they can have more parity in driving the conversation on responsible AI. So it doesn't address the geopolitical issues that you were talking about, but I just think that the coordinates are changing in this world as we move beyond the kind of polarized world of realpolitik. Because we're also, at this moment today, launching something called the AI Ethics and Governance in Practice platform for the public sector. As I mentioned before, thinking about constructive views forward, this is a program that started over 5 years ago that was originally the UK's National AI Ethics and governance guidance that has now been transformed into an online platform and an 8-module sort of training program